Welcome to this First Lutheran Church podcast, produced by First Lutheran Church in Janesville, Wisconsin. We are a congregation of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America who are seeking to embrace love's adventure together. In this Canoeing the Mountains podcast series, Jen Watson, our deacon intern, talks with me, Pastor Michael Miller, about Todd Bolsinger's book, Canoeing the Mountains. These brief conversations will introduce key themes of the book in preparation for an in-depth study starting later in fall 2023. We're glad you've joined us, and I hope to continue the conversation with you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I am here with Pastor Michael, and we will be talking about the book Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. And Pastor Michael, can you start by telling us why we are talking about this book today?
Sure. I came across this book a few years ago, and it captured my imagination. The book is talking about how the church is facing a time unlike any other time in its history. And so as we move forward in this moment, things are going to be different than they were in the past. And so it's a book about how you lead into the future when you don't know what that future looks like.
Awesome. I actually have been reading it alongside you right now, and I've been finding it quite fascinating. And I'm wondering, at the end of the podcasts that we are going to be doing, what is your goal then, challenge, maybe invitation for the congregation?
Well, my hope is that in the fall, sometime in October, and I'll be announcing a date for that shortly, but I'm hoping that we can gather a group of leaders, interested members of the congregation, to reflect on the reality that we're facing right now and what it means to give leadership. I think that the more people who understand the situation that the church is in, and actually not only the church, but every business and nonprofit, every organization of our community is facing some of the same challenges. So how do we move forward in a way that is life-giving and allows us to live out our mission? The answers aren't totally clear, but there are ideas that come out of this book that point us in a good direction. So I want to gather a group that can dig into that study at a deeper level, beginning in sometime in October.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that date in the future. One of the things with Canoeing the Mountains that caught my attention is it didn't speak to me right away as a leadership book. So can you explain to me why Todd named and titled the book the way he did?
So he uses the primary metaphor for the book is the Lewis and Clark expedition in the early time in America. Thomas Jefferson, as president, sent out a team led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, and the two of them led this discovery group to find a way to the Pacific Ocean. And they began with the notion, or the assumption, that the eastern part of the United States and the geography that they knew from that part of the United States would be similar on the western side, and that they just needed to follow the Missouri River up to its headwaters and then float in their canoes down to the Pacific Ocean. And of course, as we know, that's not what happened. They encountered the Rocky Mountains, and no canoe was going to get them through those mountains. So that's the metaphor, that the world in front of us at this point is nothing like the world that's behind us. And so when they came to the Rocky Mountains, they had to make a decision. Do we go home, or do we do something new and find a way forward?
And that's kind of where we get into that uncharted territory. And I like how Todd set it up with seminary did not prepare me for this, right? Mm-hmm. Because he also is a pastor, and so he talks then about kind of his journey of how seminary of old isn't quite the same as seminary of new, and how and why those changes have needed to happen. And I was hoping, because we've had seminary at different times in our life, if you could speak a little bit to your seminary prep and kind of what the idea was for pastors to do when they came to a church versus now, how some of that might not be as helpful.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, I was in seminary. I started in 1985 and I graduated in 1990. And in the second part of the 80s there, Luther Seminary in St. Paul was full of students. The online campus community, it was the biggest seminary at the time, and there was a lot of energy there. And I've reflected often that what we were prepared for was to go out to a congregation that was already well established, and we were well prepared to preach good sermons, to reflect on the Bible, to teach people, to provide pastoral care, to baptize, to conduct weddings, and be with people at the time of a funeral and during their grief following, and just to support that community that was already well established and flourishing. But as you've named, things have changed quite a bit, and the seminary has changed. The congregations that I've served over that time have changed. The assumptions of the role of the pastor have shifted. It's changed quite radically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my seminary, while we looked and focused on those things, because ultimately those core values, our theological understanding as ELCA Lutherans, all of that hasn't changed. But how do we then teach the message to a group that isn't coming to church the way they used to, or isn't working at home with their families on these types of gospel lessons and bringing their kids regularly to Sunday school. And so it's learning to adapt and find a new way to be leaders in today's church. So I was really enjoying that about Todd's honesty and what church looks like. So you talked a little bit about what it was then and what it is now. And the words that came up in this book, two important ones, Christendom, church, and missional church. So can you speak a little bit about the differences in those ideas?
So the notion of Christendom is a vision of where the church and the culture and the society are kind of all aligned, where society supports the church and the church supports the values of society. We've often talked about the United States being a Christian nation, and that's part of the assumption of Christendom. So we remember times when businesses weren't open on Sunday, and where schools and sports teams didn't plan events or practices when the church was doing religious education, because everything was aligned. But that's changed in many different ways, or many different shifts have caused the change, and we realize now that we don't live with that kind of alignment. So it becomes all the more important for the church to be clear about what its mission is. What are we called to? And how do we live into that mission in a world that isn't aligned? It takes us back similar to the early church, where the early followers of Jesus were finding their way to express the gospel and to create a community of the gospel in a world that didn't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess I'm going to throw my own plug in there for
Please
deacons. Just hearing you speak to the way of going out and the gospel message, and, not always being within the church walls, but being able to take what we learn here and know, the word and scripture because we are raised with it and know it here, but not everybody out in the world does. And so it's important that we take that to the world and bring the concerns of the world into the church. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to throw that plug in there for deacons. I always try to do that, as you know. So,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something that's really, really critical right now. How do we move out into the world? How do we connect with that world that has changed in so many ways? Again, the opening theme of this book is that the world in front of us is nothing like the world behind us. So we can't assume that what we've known in the past is going to work in the present, and we need to discover what does this world look like. Just like the Lewis and Clark group had to figure out what is this geography going to be, and how do we navigate it.
And I think that that's actually a really good place to end it, because we don't want to give too much away. We want the congregation to be excited about this, learn a little bit about it, and then want to read it again later. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be doing these podcasts kind of in a 6-part, right? That's kind of how the book is broken down.
5 parts.
5 parts.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to go ahead and do 5 different podcasts. So just kind of tune in just to get a little bit of an understanding of each of these parts within the book. Hopefully it gets you excited and wants you to learn more so that you can be part of the book study then in October.
Yeah, so these will be coming out one a week through the month of September. And I'd just like to end with one piece about this. As the Lewis and Clark group encountered the mountains, they embraced the adventure of moving forward. And I think about the slogan that summarizes our vision here at First Lutheran Church, embracing love's adventure together. It's exactly on target with what we read in this book, that the world in front of us is different than what's behind it. So if we're going to move forward into that world, it involves a sense of adventure and seizing that adventure and the opportunity to discover and to learn together.
Thank you.
So that excites me.
Yes, absolutely. Excites me too. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing about the next part in this book series.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for listening to this podcast. First Lutheran Church is learning to become genuinely inclusive, thoroughly engaged, externally focused, and relationally centered as we seek to live intentionally like Christ in the world. Embrace the adventure with us. You can find out more about us on our website at flcj.org. We welcome your questions and comments, which can be shared through our contact page. We're also active on Facebook and Instagram.